My volume seems to be good at the moment, so I want to take advantage of that as much as possible. I want to discuss the subject of clinical depression. This is a huge issue. Mental health issues have generally got a lot more traction in recent years, certainly in this country and perhaps in other countries as well. And I think there's a range of reasons for that. I give the Liberal Democrat Party credit for that, incidentally, because I think they were one of the first major parties to, make it an important issue. Um, but there's been other prominent figures that have raised it. First Lady Rosalind Carter made that an issue when she was in the White House, and yeah, it's a very important issue. Not long ago, ITV in the UK, to their credit, they had this kind of publicity thing where they had, I guess there were mannequins on top of their building, and those mannequins represented the estimated 84 men who take their lives in this country every single week. Every single week. That's far, far higher than the homicide rate in this country. Um, and the rate of male suicides is significantly higher than the number of women who kill themselves. I don't know what the statistics are for that, but I read somewhere it's something like more women attempt suicide, but more men go through with it. Something like that. Either way, it's clearly and like I say, give ITV credit for drawing attention to that issue, that very important issue. Um, Depression is not something that's easy to summarize. It's not something that's easy to describe. A while back, I was going to talk about mental health issues generally, but that would just be way too wide a spectrum. I think you'd really need to focus on a particular issue. But without question, it's become more important now. Some would say we're more sensitive as a society, as a generation. There's some truth in that, but when it comes to mental health, I think that's more to do with a better understanding today. I mean, to just provide a contrast, in the 1950s, let's say there was a big railway accident. In those days, as this country did experience at that time, local people near the accident site would help out. They would give the survivors tea, they would comfort them. Maybe a priest or a clergyman would offer prayers. But really, that was it. Post war Britain was very much about pull yourself together. It was quite in that sense, gritty sort of place. Now people would get professional counselling and they would, for PTSD and so on. Um, Needless to say, it's a huge issue in the military. A lot of a lot of veterans go through post traumatic stress disorder as well. So it's a huge issue in the military, and I think the military and the armed forces have improved somewhat, but even within, there's probably more understanding to be had. Um, for me, greater understanding isn't about wrapping people in cotton wool. It's about understanding that this is a problem. Um, I think in Britain, particularly, I think we are quite a fast-paced country compared to other European countries. We have quite a fast pace of life. Maybe it's because we're more an urban society. I don't know. But I also think it's the modern world generally, the influence of social media. I think all these things play a role. But it's not that depression's not a new thing. It's always been part of human society. But perhaps some of the mediums have changed. There's perhaps more polarization. Social media can do some very good things, but it can also have a very negative influence. Um, but depression, like I say, is really not something that can be easily explained, and it's not something that can be caricatured as being down to one particular type of person. I think that's important to say. It's true that there may be certain things that are quite commonplace as factors for depression. Relationship problems and financial concerns are probably very high up there, but there's many other issues as well. I mean, you could have someone who's a multimillionaire, they never have to worry about money, but maybe they're in a loveless marriage. Maybe you have someone who is is in a loving marriage, but they're worried about money and they're worried, therefore, how are they going to provide for their family? That causes depression. Um, but unfortunately, money's a necessary evil in this world. So those mediums, things like money, work, relationships, I think they all play a role. I think it's very important to take each day at a time. But, just looking at the public figures, certain public figures who have insinuated or said that they've been through depression, it really shows it affects everyone. The actor Stephen Fry, former First Lady, the late Barbara Bush, who was laid to rest today, she spoke about her depression in the 19 what she went through in the 1970s, and she said in an interview in the 1990s that she never sought help for that because it was stubbornness at that time. Um, Tyson Fury, the boxer, has been through it. In fact, quite a few boxers have been through it. And I think, as a boxing fan, I think a large part of that is the immense pressure that they face. I'm sure there are many politicians that go through serious clinical depression, but they're reluctant to seek help because they're concerned the tabloids would maybe be all over it and present them as a weak leader. I would like to see a situation where politicians feel confident to come forward and say, yes, I've been through clinical depression. I'm making a point with this. Like, let's say they lost their seat. Let's say they're facing particularly personal vitriolic attacks in the press, something like that. I think if elected representatives can publicly say, yes, I've been through that, it would be a good sign. Public figures like the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have taken a strong line on this to their credit. I think that's important. Um, and I really think that you need to have empathy. Now, that's not to say that every single person that has depression is a likable person. There might be some people who go through clinical depression and they're not particularly amicable to other people. But to me, that only demonstrates how widespread it is. And it is something that should definitely be taken seriously. No one should think that they're mentally tough enough to get past it. You could be a mentally very strong person, but clinical depression is something that digs very deep into your psyche and it can really overshadow anything else. You could be feeling content, you could be feeling okay, and then it just comes in and it overshadows everything else. And in the worst case scenario, it can make you think about just ending it all. It's a very, very powerful thing, and unfortunately, there isn't really any simple answers to get over it. In fact, getting over it is too simplistic in itself. But I do think that recognizing that you have clinical depression is a first step. To be clear here, clinical depression it has to be understood. It isn't just feeling bad. If you lose your keys, you're going to be stressed out and you'll feel irritated, and it would be a big inconvenience. But maybe that triggers something else. It triggers thinking about how things are not going right in your life generally. That then triggers depression. So depression isn't just about you're having a tough day or you're a bit stressed out or you're feeling bad about something. It's deeper than that. That's how you know it's depression. It's something that it really it's a horrible thing. It really is, and yet it's normal in the sense that a lot of people go through it. I would say most people go through it at least once in their life, but for some people, it is recurrent, and that could be because the source of the depression isn't being solved, and it's sometimes maybe something that isn't easily solved. So I think if you feel that you're going through clinical depression, an obvious step is to look at the factors that are leading to that. Is it financial concerns? Is it relationship concerns? And in many cases, it might not be so simple to get out of those situations. That's why I think it's more practical to take each day at a time rather than losing sleep over the future. And that's a lot easier said than done when, for example, you're in debt or you're worried about some letter coming through the post or you're worried about your girlfriend or your boyfriend, ending the relationship, these sort of things, your husband or your wife for that matter. Um, and everyone's different. What one person with depression is going through is going to be in many cases very different from what someone else with depression is going through. Their stories could be very different. yet what they both have in common is this shackling cloud that's weighing them down. There's no easy answers. I mean, wealth isn't a guarantee of happiness. If you look at some of the wealthiest, richest countries in the world, Japan, South Korea, the very high suicide rates, a country that's been described